Carol Robinson is with us. Carol has been with AL.com and the Birmingham News for many, many years. It's the first time she's ever been on our show, and we welcome her in on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. How are you today, Carol?
Good morning. I'm well. How are y'all?
Doing fantastic. Thanks a lot. Carol was in the courtroom yesterday, so we're going to try to maybe get some more details, especially as it relates to Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley. And I want to apologize in advance, Carol. We may interrupt you a couple of times if we need some clarification. So we don't like doing that, but I do want to apologize in advance.
Interrupt.
So everyone knows that by now that Brandon Miller dropped Miles off, did not want to go in the club, left. Can you pick up the timeline as best you can as it relates to Brandon Miller from that moment?
Yes. Well, we don't know where Brandon Miller went, after he dropped off Darius Miles and Jaden Bradley at the club, the 1225 club. But we know that shortly after 1:30 a.m. that Sunday, which was January 15th, there was, I would not call it I guess there was an altercation or an encounter, might be the better word, between Michael Davis and Darius Miles with the victim, Jamea Harris, her boyfriend and her cousin. They were all in a car. They had left the club also. According to all accounts, there was no interaction, nothing inside the club. But after the club, when they were sitting there eating food, Miles and Davis approached their car. Davis was dancing around the car and basically trying to get, Jamea Harris's phone number. At that point, her boyfriend rolled down the window, said words to the effect of, she's got a boyfriend, she's not interested, you need to move along. There was some jawing back and forth. I think Davis said, I don't want your girl. And Miles and Davis left that area, left the car. According to testimony, Miles then texted Brandon Miller and, said, bring me my gun, but he used slang words to say that. And the gun was apparently already in Miller's car, and Miller returned. And at that point, Miles and Davis went to Miller's Dodge Charger. Miles told Davis, again using slang, where the gun was, which was in the back seat, and Davis retrieved that gun. He went back to the victim's vehicle, to the driver's side window, and opened fire.
Was Brandon Miller asked by authorities when Darius Miles reached out and asked him to bring his, and I think the slang was joint, back? Was he asked what he thought he was bringing that back for?
According to the detective's testimony and Darius Miles' defense attorney, Miles had said something to the effect of there was someone, quote, faking, and the defense attorney indicated that meant, threat.
Carol, if you can, explain to us what the DA told you about any charges with Brandon Miller, because I think a lot of people around the country are asking, why is Brandon Miller not being charged with something? You guys were asking the DA about Brandon Miller's role in this. What did you learn from the DA?
Right. That was our obvious question. That was the first question after the hearing ended. And basically the Chief Deputy District Attorney, Paula Whitley, said, first, I can't answer that question, but then went on to say that there was nothing to charge him with according to the law.
Carol Robinson is with us. She's a public safety reporter for AL.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at @RobinsonCarol. She's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. There are a couple things that are in this story that I want to ask you about just to get some clarification, if I can. So there was slang used here, but essentially at some point, and I'm confused who said this, who the authorities think said this, but at some point said the gun is in the hat, and essentially or used slang to say a bullet is in the chamber. Who actually said that to whom?
Darius Miles said that to Michael Davis. He said the heat is in the hat.
Okay.
At the gun.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went on to say, that there's in the head.
Okay, because there was some confusion. I think some people thought Brandon Miller may have been saying that to Miles. So that was not Brandon Miller saying that at all. Okay.
No. Brandon Miller, no, that was Miles, Darius Miles.
And there has been some confusion. Now, I know Brandon Miller's windows got a couple of bullet holes in them, but there's some confusion about this blockade. Can you clear up, there was, there were some cars apparently that had blocked the Jeep the victim was in.
Yeah, a Charger and a Challenger that I think Jaden Bradley and Brandon Miller owned. The report was, or there's an allegation out there, that they blocked in the victim's Jeep.
Correct. When I spoke with Jamea Harris's mother, in the days following her death, her mother said that there were two vehicles that intentionally blocked in Jamea Harris's Jeep from leaving. In testimony yesterday, the words the detective used, were that there were two vehicles, which he stated were Miller's and Bradley's, blocking the road, and the Jeep could not leave. He did not indicate whether that was intentional or not.
When you say the district attorney or the police didn't?
The detective, Brandon Culpepper.
All right, so the detective, Brandon Culpepper, didn't indicate that was intentional, that they were trying to block the Jeep in.
Correct. We just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Should be noted here, all of Carol's information coming from testimony in court yesterday. How much, and help me if I'm wrong on this, there's dash cam video and that comes from Brandon Miller's car. Is that true? And what role has that played in the entire investigation from the moment that police were called?
Right. They have multiple videos. They have surveillance video from the houndstooth. They have surveillance video from the Publix, and they had surveillance video from Brandon Miller's dash cam. And I can't specify which video caught what, but all of it is being used as evidence in the case.
Do we know whether or not Jamea Harris's boyfriend had a gun on him?
He did. He fired 2 shots after Michael Davis opened fire, and Davis was struck in the shoulder and grazed on the side. They testified, court documents and testimony from yesterday indicate Michael Davis fired the first shot.
Carol Robinson is with us for a few more moments, AL.com. You can read all of her work there. Follow her on Twitter at Robinson Carol. She's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. You have covered a ton of these. So for those that don't know, this was a hearing to determine if there was enough evidence to hand this over to a grand jury. And if I'm not mistaken, you thought it was unusual that decision wasn't made right away. Why is that unusual, and do you read anything into that?
No, I don't read anything into it because I've never covered something in this judge's courtroom.
Okay.
Typically, the judge at the end of the hearing just says, I've heard all the evidence, and I ruled that there is enough evidence to move this case forward to a grand jury. 99.9% of the time, it's forwarded on to the grand jury. I thought it was a little unusual that she took it under advisement, but again, there was 2.5 hours of testimony, several witnesses, and I guess she wanted to, take her time to thoroughly examine everything she'd heard.
You've sat in a lot of courtrooms, you've heard a lot of these hearings, so I haven't, Carol, so I don't know, if this is even, and you could tell me, Ryan, that's a terrible question, and I'm fine with that. But and a lot of people, understandably, on this show are concerned about Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley. From the testimony of the detective, from what you heard from the district attorney, and maybe this is trying to read intent, and I don't ask you to do that, did you get the feeling they thought that these were just somewhat innocent bystanders, that they made poor decisions? I mean, could you glean any sort of feeling what they thought their overall role or lack of role was in this?
No, I mean, they were treated in testimony strictly as witnesses, in my opinion.
In other words, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Carol, but I feel like I'm cross-examining you, and I apologize for that. But in other words, you would say that they weren't treated as if the district attorney or the police thought they had a greater role in this and maybe were cooperative, so that they are being treated differently, I guess is kind of what I'm trying to ask. And I don't know that you can glean that from any sort of hearing like this anyway.
Yeah, Definitely cannot glean that from
Okay.
any sort of from the hearing. That's the best I can answer.
No, that's
to
fine.
that.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's,
Well, I would ask this question as well because I've gotten this in my timeline. Since they were not charged, was there for their cooperation? Is that why they were not charged, or are they saying they didn't violate any laws?
Well, I think, and I've talked to some legal experts. Basically, it comes down to knowledge and intent. And I think what they are stating is that Brandon Miller may have had, or obviously had, no idea what the gun was going to be used for.
So, as far as you know, is the only text Darius Miles sent to Brandon Miller was the one that said, just, bring me my gun, basically?
Yes.
And-
That's the only one we talked about in court yesterday.
and did it come up in court that, was there an understanding that Miles had that gun in the car earlier and either accidentally or intentionally left it? Did any of that come up?
No, that did not come up.
Okay. So there are still a lot of questions that remain to be answered. And
Correct.
yeah. And when do they
Yeah.
think, when would you anticipate this goes to trial, Carol?
So if it'll go to the grand jury in the next couple months. Grand jury proceedings are secret, so we don't really know when they're going to happen, and we're not privy to the testimony in a grand jury. We become aware of it if an indictment is issued. And if an indictment is issued, and they always say you can indict a ham sandwich, it doesn't take much to get an indictment. It could be a year, 2 years, 3 years before it goes to trial. I'm covering trials now of crimes that happened in 2018. So Tuscaloosa obviously has probably a bit of a smaller caseload, of murder and capital murder cases than, say, Jefferson County. So it could be quicker, but you're looking at a year to 2 years, I would think.
Yeah. Okay. Carol, we appreciate it. I know those are a lot of questions there and a lot of stuff you couldn't answer, but I do appreciate you taking some time with us and trying to answer as much as you could for those of us that aren't as up to date on this stuff as you are.
Or in the courtroom.
Or in the courtroom like you were.
Yeah, it was an interesting situation.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Thank you for the time, Carol. Have a great week.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. Carol Robinson is there on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.